I'll be talking about the Readium mobile projects, and more so about where we are with the deployment and where we're going, what's implemented, and some examples of in different apps as well as the test apps. So basically, I'm going to try to uncloud this cloud a bit during this presentation. In last year, we mentioned at the DPUB Summit that the R2 modules are basically, we're building blocks to create apps. And I've tried to put this together that we have these 5 core modules. We have the R2 shared, Navigator, Streamer. You've heard Navigator, Streamer now a few times. You've heard LCP, and have you heard OPDS today yet? Well, but I'm sure we know OPDS, and so therefore those are the kind of the 5 core modules that we built natively in Swift and also in Kotlin, and of course in other platforms. Then another topics in the building blocks or toolkit, we have the R2 test apps, which are basically sample applications, sample implementations, and for test purposes. For you guys that have been last year in Berlin, we've mentioned that that it's not supposed to be like the end user app, and so we're showing all the features in a way where you can see what you can implement in yours. The R2 workspace, for the developers around here, you've seen on the GitHub repositories the R2 workspaces. Those are really just helper tools, helper starting tools, where someone that hasn't built yet anything with R2 can easily get started with these building blocks and with these modules. So I want to just listed them here so that for the ones that know what I'm talking about here with development environments, we make sure that the modules that we have work on the latest Xcode versions as well as Android Studio versions, using the latest Swift and also Kotlin. Swift is the programming language which we use for iOS and in Xcode, and Kotlin the programming language that we're using for Android development. I want to mention here one thing though. I have in certain versionings saying moving to, like Xcode 10.1 moving to 10.2. We're not trying to always be on the very latest, because we have to keep all the community in mind that some have not yet updated to the very latest macOS version, have the latest Xcode. So basically, what we're trying to accomplish is staying with that, what also Apple or Google kind of as the minimum allows and supports, and updating as they update. So that if we update to the latest 10.2 and somebody is still on 10.1, doesn't work, that we don't want to have that. And to mention, and you're going to see later on in my slides about the different platforms. Currently, the native, the mobile apps work on iPhone, iPad, Android phones, tablets, but also Chromebook. So we'll get there. I want to, as another building block, I want to mention, this is a slide from last year, and you can actually, in all my slides, I have marked them. I've used maybe 1 or 2 slides from last year because they're still relevant and they have updated. So one of the essential building blocks is Readium CSS for being able to set custom styles. I'm not going to go into detail here because I've linked it as well and to the presentation from last year, but I wanted to make sure that this is still and one of the essential building blocks, together with the others that I mentioned before. Another slide from last year, but it's relevant and has been progressing, is the Readium web publication manifest. So throughout my entire presentation, I will mention the web manifest again and again, because I want to show different examples of what do I mean with server, backend, client, front end. I'm going to even mention something about online, offline, download, streaming. All of that has something to do with how the manifest is created, is produced, it's consumed, and where it comes from. So I added the slide. The link goes straight to last year's presentation at the second, basically, where we talked about this. Now, where are we? We get questions often that, is the toolkit ready? Can we use it? Is it in production? Is it stable? How long does it take? Well, we have all these features fully implemented and developed. I've listed, and now the next few slides are going to be kind of this check marks. And you will see a lot of green check marks, blue and orange, and they mean all something different. And luckily, it's big enough to read it. So the agenda is on the bottom. In Swift and in Kotlin, we have EPUB 2 and 3 support ready. Custom styling, as I mentioned before, when I mentioned Readium CSS, custom styling is also ready. CBZ support is implemented and ready. PDF support is in the Swift implementation. I don't have a check mark on the Kotlin implementation for PDF support because we just literally finalized it a few weeks ago. And this is just a simple PDF implementation. You open a PDF, you can render it, you can add a bookmark, you can browse through it. So the navigation part of it is you can use it and expand on it. And the implementation and integration of Readium Web Publication Manifest is in both Swift and Kotlin. And I shortened it up in the next line, the EPUB extension as well in both. So we can use the Readium Web Pub Manifest for EPUB fully in both apps, in both platforms. For audiobooks, we have the extension for audiobooks. We have an implementation on Kotlin for this. And here's where I mention even offline streaming. If a manifest doesn't necessarily come from the device itself, from the local device, from the app itself, but from some server, some remote server, then this is also what is already implemented and can be used, because it doesn't matter in the architecture the way we have it. It doesn't matter where the streamer is. It doesn't have to be on the device itself, on the app itself. It can be also a remote streamer. And of course, OPDS 1 and 2 support in both. So you will see in a couple of slides later, I have some screenshots and I have some demos where I show how OPDS is presented and used. And I have another slide. So we have a bit more. Readium LCP for EPUB is in both fully implemented now. So, and with all the requirements. So you can basically use and test that out for your app if you needed an LCP protected integration. And fixed layout support for one page. We finalized that in both, in Swift and Kotlin. For 2-page, the implementation is complete on Kotlin, Swift to follow. Right to left support. But I want to also mention here vertical written publication. So it's in both implemented and tested. Obviously, there needs to be a little bit more test because I can't read vertical. So I don't necessarily, from what we have tested, it worked perfectly fine. And I have here accessibility, where accessibility is always kind of work in progress, but as it is right now, the test apps, the navigation through the test app itself is fully accessible, so you can actually go through and you don't get stuck, basically. 2 more. Pop-up footnotes and text-to-speech with overlay is both integrated in Kotlin, not yet in Swift. But all these 2 pages that I mentioned now, they're completed. At least in one entire platform, there's some that are missing here, but the essential, the core is completed and integrated. And so is it ready yet? Yes, it is. From what I just shown you as features, it is ready and stable and is in production. And you can find on each of the repositories on GitHub, you can find the tagged version of each module. And you can also find the test app also as well tagged. But both apps are also live and in production on the App Store and Play Store. You can download them, test them, give us feedback. Okay. Where are we going next? So, of course, I mentioned, yeah, we're stable, we're in production. But there's still some features that we're working on. We have a list of features that we are either currently working on, is planned. So as you can see here, the orange check marks, Readium LCP PDF is currently in development. A position list is currently in development. Annotations and highlights are currently in development by an external contributor. It's DRM Inside. And they had the need to implement annotations and highlights now, and they're working with us to get that then contributed and integrated back into R2. Same for digital visual narratives is another extension of the Readium webpub manifest. And you will hear about this topic tomorrow more from Florian. Now, but what I want to kind of also highlight here is the blue check marks. They're planned, but as you can compare, wherever there is a blue check mark, on the other side is either a green or an orange. So there is already an implementation either completed or currently in progress. So anyone that would like to help or contribute something and kind of replicate that in the other platform is really welcome to do so, but from our end, this is planned. A few more topics that are planned is search. And I mentioned before, text-to-speech with overlay. We haven't completed the sentence highlighting yet, but the overlay, basically, it's a visual overlay which reads the entire book aloud, but also shows what is being read. And to complete fully TTS, we will need, obviously, to complete also the sentence highlighting. But since highlighting, search, annotations kind of go, once we have highlighting in general, search and sentence highlighting with TTS, it's going to be also much easier to implement. Okay. Now, what I want to show is some use cases. I've talked about all the different modules and which features have been completed, but how do I know what module do I need to integrate into my own app based on what I'm trying to do? So let's take the first one. I want to read books located on my device offline. So I need the R2 shared models, all the models in R2 shared. I need a streamer to generate that manifest, and I need a navigator to consume it. I don't need an OPDS because that in that use case, I don't have an OPDS feed. I don't need LCP, so I only need these three components. Another example, the next one, I want to read an EPUB EPUBs that are LCP protected. So I need all the modules that I needed in the first example, plus R2 LCP. So you can see, you can puzzle them really together. You don't have to kind of fork and clone the entire projects and try to mimic what we have done with the test app. So you can just pick the modules that you need for your own implementation. And I'm going to read the third one, and the rest you get the idea. I want to read books that are not on my device, but streamed from a remote server. That was the example that I mentioned a little bit with the audiobook. So I still need the shared model, and I need a navigator, because the streaming is happening remote. So I get the data through a manifest streamed, and I need to navigate. So obviously now, based on this, you probably can come up with a few more use cases. Maybe after the presentation, you can tell me some of yours, and we can see which modules we will need. Now, I mentioned before, and this I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but recent activities with Apple and kind of made us think, what are really the native platforms that we need to support or are supporting? Currently, yes, with Swift, we are supporting iOS devices, which are iPhones and iPads. But Apple is coming up with an iPad OS, where with Mac OS, it's a different story. But with iPad OS, as it seems, we will be able to create an iPad app and then just open it or like install it on a Mac. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually built on Mac OS. So question mark there. We'll have to discuss that at some later point or see how that evolves. But on Android, we're on phones, tablets, and also on Chromebooks. Any one of you has a Chromebook? You should download the R2 Reader from the Play Store, because it works as the same way as it works on an Android device. I added here, I made that a little different color than green. It's orange, because what I've noticed is we have to still tweak some click events. On a touch device, you don't necessarily have clicks. So on a Chromebook, you have a keyboard, you have real clicks. So I've noticed just a few issues with that it wouldn't respond, but anything touch works perfectly fine on Chromebook. Now, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to show you how to. I'm going to show with just a few screens, or actually just a few lines of code, how you can actually initiate the reader, an EPUB reader, and navigate through it. Of course, I don't have internet here, Wi-Fi here, so I cannot really play the video, but trust me, this is just going to be in 3 screens over. So a Kotlin example where we're creating a brand new Android application. And these samples on the left side, the first screen, they're just inside the project. They're not coming from an OPDS feed. It's just like to make it simple, just to be able to open some EPUBs. In the Android app, you need the dependencies. All the modules that I mentioned before, shared, streamer, and navigator. That's pretty much it in the setup. And these few lines of code to actually, there's more lines of code to read from the assets to actually create the buttons than to actually open the reader. Opening the reader is just like 3 lines of code because all of that is in the navigator module. So you get this 2 screens that I just showed, and you can see the differences between the ones that I've marked with a red border. The ones on the left side, they don't have any table of content. They don't have any. It's really just the renderer. So now, but the manifest has all the information that you need to create your table of content, because that's functionality that you want to create in your app. And maybe the table of content, you're not going to present it how we do it in the test app. Maybe the settings, you're not going to present how we do it in the test app. But from there, you add the settings, the custom styles, you add any other UI that you need, and then you have a reader. Obviously, it's not just that. So you have to create a lot more around a reading app to discover the books before you can actually read them. But the reading part is kind of as simple as I showed. Now, this is again a slide from last year where we introduced and we mentioned the test app and what they are and what they're not. It's still the same. They're not production apps. They're live. You can test them. They're not end user apps as you would expect an app to be on the App Store. They're for testing purposes, but you get all the functionality. As we develop functionality in those test apps, you will see all the functionality and how it works. Now, here's the interesting part. I want to show different areas of apps that are built on R2. The center one is the R2 test app. The one on the left side is an app from the company Ekitabu. They do accessible reading apps in third world countries and working with UNICEF to actually create interactive accessible EPUBs. So they're using R2 to test out their content. And on the right side is the Dita Reader, which is, well, it's my app. So I'm showing here an OPDS representation. The data, where the OPDS comes from, could be all the same, but the representation could be different. So you can choose how your app is going to look like. Showing here a bookshelf. It's again, it could be the same data, but the way it's for your app could be completely different. The navigator, which I just showed you with those few lines of code, what you can generate, this is what you can get on all the apps, and this is the part where it looks always the same. The action bar up, you can generate whichever way you want. You can style it whichever way you want. You can add settings. If you don't want all the settings that we have in the test app, you don't have to add them. You can add your own. And just to show the table of content, obviously, it would look similar in these three variations, but in yours, it might look different. Now, this is, again, another OPDS implementation. This is Chromebook. So this is how the app actually, this is the R2 reader. This is how it looks on the Chromebook. And it works entirely like you would imagine. It works on an iPad or a tablet. But now I'm going to go one screen back. These are all Chromebook apps. So for easier screenshot generations, I just opened the apps all together in Chromebook and navigated them all through so they work in and not in a collapse mode as a mobile app, basically. If you expand them in full screen, you have the full screen kind of tablet mode. The reflowable EPUB, also on the Chromebook. Obviously, this would look the same on iPad and tablet. And fixed layout EPUBs. I'm showing this in the Dita Reader because one of the collections that are in there, they have all just fixed layout, and it works perfectly fine and really smoothly with what we did with fixed layout on Kotlin. That's still where, and on this screen, I kind of kept the proof that we're really on Chromebook. And last screen here is I've added, because both of these apps are the R2 reader and also the Dita Reader, they're both have LCP implementation. So, and the way I've done the LCP implementation in the Dita Reader is basically the exact same way as it's in the R2 reader. I actually used that implementation to see what can we improve in the R2 reader in order to be able to easier implement it in other apps. Because obviously, not all the features are being used in all apps the exact same way. So the modules should work in a very easy kind of couple lines of code to integrate. What you do custom around it, it's up to you, but to be able to open an LCP encrypted book, it should not be more than what I just showed you before, not more than those lines of code either. Now, I thought I had so much more, but I think I've said enough. So just to recap a bit, all the repositories you can find on GitHub/Readium, and it's easy to find them all. There are a bunch of them, but each module has its own repository. You can find them by R2, the module name, and -Swift or -Kotlin. You can find the test apps there as well. But also, I still want you guys to get involved. I wanted that last year, and we want that again. So we have been collaborating with others that have needs on their own to develop features, and that works really quite well collaborating with others. So if you have any feature that you really need and want to develop, have the resources, please help us out. So